In this video, we want to start chapter 8. And in this chapter, we are going to learn more about the concept of transfers in the simulation, how we can potentially transfer the entities to different locations in the simulation. When we started the simulation, the easiest thing that we had was that, for example, if I have a process 1, and then I have, let's say, another process 2. And then the entity is done on process 1. We just had a simple connection between the two processes. So the entity was immediately transferred to process 2, and then the process 2 started. So this is the simple scenario that we started with. In this scenario, there is no transfer time between the first operation and the second operation. The other scenario that we had was the situation when we had, for example, process 1 and process 2. However, we wanted to tell the simulation model that it takes time to move the entities or the parts from machine 1 or process 1 to machine 2 or process 2. And if we wanted to do that, we assign one station to each one of the processes or the machines or the locations that we have in the simulation, and we want to send the entity to. So this is station 1, this is station 2. We also assigned one route module to each one of these specific locations in the simulation, and we connected each one of the processes to this route and to these stations. So in this scenario, when the entity was done, for example, in machine 1 or in process 1, and through the route module, the entity was transferred to another station. Let's say if the entity was going to go to process 2 and get processed in that machine, then the entity through route module was transferred to station 2, and once it got to the station, it got processed on the second machine on process 2, and then after that, again through the route module, which is connected to process 2, the entity was sent to another location, which is identified by another station. So this was the method that we learned, in which we could just use some simple transfer time that we identified in the route module to capture the possibility that it takes time to transfer the entities from one process to another or from one location to another. However, what we want to learn next is a little more complex scenarios. For example, what if there are some resources in the system that are in charge of moving the entities or transferring entities? For example, what if we have some forklifts or fork trucks or pallets or even people that are in charge of picking the parts from one machine or one process, taking them to another location to get the next operation or the next process? Let's say if there is one forklift in the manufacturing facility, and then when the part is done in machine 1 or in process 1, this forklift is going to pick up the part and is going to take it to the next process or the next operation. And in that scenario, if there is only one forklift in the system, that forklift itself, which is a resource, can be a bottleneck in the system, because we may have one part that is already done in process 1, and the part is ready to go to the next operation. However, the forklift is busy somewhere else in the system, so the part has to wait till the forklift comes back and takes the part and takes it to the next operation. So these are the scenarios where the transfer tools are resources in the system, and we can play with the number of resources that are available to see if we can produce more parts per day or per the time of the simulation or not. So if the transfer tools, forklifts or pallets or even people, are resources that are used in the system, then like any other resources in the simulation, when we want to use them to transfer entities to different parts or to different locations of the simulation, first we have to seize these resources. So here, for example, before I can use the resource to send it to another location, I have to first seize the resource. After the part is done processing on machine 1 or process 1, then I'm going to seize the resource that I need for transferring the part to another location. And after I got a hold of that resource, then I'm going to activate the route module to be able to send the part to another location. And similarly, when the part is received in another location, so when the part is received in a specific station, let's say the part is received in station 2, before I can use the part and perform the operation on process 2, first I have to release the resource so that that resource can go to other part of the simulation and moves other entities. So after the part is delivered in station 2, then I have to release the resource. And to be able to do that, I need a release module. After the part is received in station 2, the entity is going to release the resource that is using, and then the entity is going to go to process 2 to get the second operation done. We need these extra modules to be able to capture the situations where we are using resources to transfer entities between operations or between locations. And we need to do that for each one of these specific locations in the simulation where the parts are going to go to get the process done. However, Arena has made it easy for us, and Arena has 2 specific modules that actually do these 2 works for you together. So the module that does the seize and the route for you is called the leave module and is available in advanced transfer panel. And the module that does the work of the station and the release for you is called the enter module, and that one is also available in the advanced transfer panel. So instead of adding 4 modules to each one of the locations in the simulations to be able to capture transfer of the entities between different locations, we can simply add 2 modules. Those are the entity and those are the enter and leave modules to capture the fact that the resources are going to be used to transfer entities between different locations. So let's go back to the Arena and see how we can implement this situation in Arena. Okay, so please open the model 7.1 that we developed in previous session, where the parts came to the system and they went through the manufacturing cells. If you remember, in this model, when we put the station and the route module, we also considered 2-minute transfer time between different manufacturing cells, and we just simply put the 2-minute transfer times in the route module. So that was simple, right? There was no resources used for transfer or anything like that. However, we want to consider a more complex scenario, and that's the scenario where we are going to use cards for transferring the entities or parts between different manufacturing cells, and we want to see how we can capture that. And however, in this scenario, we want to make the model a little more complex. We are going to actually use 2 cards that are in charge of transferring parts between different locations. So these cards not only are in charge of transferring entities or parts between different manufacturing cells, but also when the parts come to the system, they are going to transfer the parts from the entrance point to the manufacturing cells. And also when the parts are done in the manufacturing cells, these cards are going to move the parts from the manufacturing cells to the exit as well. And we have 2 of those cards, and we want to see how we can change this model to use those resources for transferring the parts between different locations in the simulation. So please open model 7.1 that we used in previous session to capture the presence of the sequences, and save this model as a new model in the folder for week 13, and name this model as model 8.1, and at the end of the name of the model, put resource constraint transfers. So this is because we are using some resources to perform the transfer of the entities in the model. So that's why we call it as resource constraint transfers, because if the number of resources that we have is not enough, the resources for transferring the entities will be a constraint or a limitation in the model. So at this point, the first change that I want you guys to do is to go to the basic process, to the resource data module, And here, enter a new resource. This resource, I'm going to call it as cart, and it's fixed capacity, and I have two of these resources. Okay, so that's the resource that I'm going to use to transfer the parts between different entities. After we define this new resource, I want you guys to go to the first leave module that we have on the right side of the first manufacturing cell, and let's delete this module. And what we want to put here instead of the route module that we just deleted is a leave module. And the leave module is the one that is available in the advanced transfer. So go to the advanced transfer panel, and here you see there is leave module. So drag and drop the leave module next to cell 1 processing. I'm going to call it leave cell 1. Okay, and here you have the option to define this if this operation of transferring is you want it to be counted as a value added, you want it to be a non-value added, you want it to be counted as a transfer time, and all of that, you can specify those here as well. So let's assume we want this to be considered as part of the transfer time. For now, we are not going to change the delay part. I'm going to explain to you in a little bit later when we are going to use the delay part. So as we are going to leave this specific location or leave the manufacturing cell 1, what is the thing that we want to do? We want to seize a resource. Okay, so there are a bunch of things here. We are actually going to learn all of them. The one that we are going to learn right now is that to be able to leave manufacturing cell 1, first I need to be able to seize a resource. And what is the resource that I want to seize? Here we have the option to specify this. So if it's just a resource, we can specify. If it's a set of resources, we can specify those as well. Here simply it's the resource that we already have defined. What is the name of the resource? The name of the resource is a cart. And for now, again, we are not going to change anything else in the simulation model. And what is the next thing? After we seize the resource, we need to send the entity to the next location. And so I want to be able to do that. I want to basically route the entity to the next location. And to be able to route, similar to what the scenarios we have had before, I can either route the entity to another station, or if I'm using sequences, I can just say for routing the entity to another location, just look at the sequences that these entities are carrying with themselves. However, I still need to tell the simulation that what is the move time. And to be able to define the move time, if you remember, we defined one variable in this model, which was transfer time. And we put the value of 2 in the transfer times, and that's basically is going to capture our move time, and this is 2 minutes, so make sure to change the unit of time to minutes. So this module, the leave module, basically captures the seizing the resource, which is a cart, and then after we seize that resource, we are going to use the sequences that these entities carry with themselves and send them to their destination, and this is going to be the transfer time that we are going to use. And I'm going to connect that to manufacturing cell 1. And I'm going to repeat that for other manufacturing cells as well. For manufacturing cell 2, make sure to delete the route module, and we are going to bring another leave modules here. That's going to be leave cell 2. And I want this to be considered as a transfer time. Don't change anything else in this part. This is going to seize the resource for me. And what is the name of that resource? It's a cart. And I'm going to then route this entity to a different location. What is the destination or location that I want to send the entity to? I'm going to define it based on the sequence. For the move time, I'm going to use the variable transfer time, and the unit of the move is time is in minutes. So, and again, make sure to connect the manufacturing cell to the leave module. So make sure to repeat that for the manufacturing cell 3 and manufacturing cell 4 as well. So after we are done with putting the leave module for all these 4 manufacturing cells, make sure to save your model so that you don't lose anything. Now we are going to work on the left side of this manufacturing cell. So here is the place where we need to have one station module when these entities are transferred to, and then we have to release the resource, and then the entity gets processed on these manufacturing cells. And we set the module that is in charge of taking care of the station and releasing the entity is going to be the enter module. So I'm going to just save the name of the station before I delete it, because that's the name. These names are the ones that we used in defining the sequences. When we define the sequences, we use these names. So since I don't want to go and update my sequences, I'm going to just save this so that I use the same name for the enter module, so that I don't need to update the sequences that I already have defined between these manufacturing cells. Okay, so I'm going to delete this first station module, and I'm going to bring an enter module. So for the name of this enter module, I say cell 1 station. So this is basically, so this second name, similar to what I said before, this second name is the one that is used in the coding and everything in the simulation name. So what is important is that this name to be the same as the name that we have used before, so that we don't need to update the sequences. So I'm going to call it cell 1, and then for the station name, I'm going to call it cell 1 station. So that is the name that is used and everything in the simulation model. So make sure this name is similar to what you had defined previously, so that you don't need to update the sequences that you have defined. And so this takes care of the defining the session part. And then the other thing is that we want to release a resource. So here, when we transfer the entity in, what is the thing that we want to do? We want to release the resource. Okay, so we specified here at the very end, release the resource. And it's the resource, obviously. And what is the name of the resource? The name of the resource is cart. Okay, so that's the resource that we want to release. Do not change anything else in this part. I will tell you later what are these cells for and when are we going to change them. For now, this enter module is going to help me to define one station here, and also make sure that at this station we are going to release the transfer resource, which I have called it as cart. So release that transfer resource as well. And I'm going to do the same for the second manufacturing cell. So this is going to be cell 2 station. So I'm going to call it cell 2, and the name of the station that I use in the coding and everything behind the scene is cell 2 station. I'm not going to change anything. When the entity is transferred into this station, what is the next thing that I want to do? I want to release the resource, and the name of that resource that I want to be released is cart. So do that for manufacturing cell 3 and 4 as well. And also make sure to connect all these enter modules to the manufacturing cells. So again, just to remind you, if you look at the sequences that you have defined, for example, in sequence 1, the names that we have used to specify the steps of the sequence is cell 1 station, cell 2 station, cell 3 stations, and so forth. That's why when I put these stations definition in the station name, I wanted to make sure that I'm using the exact same name that I have used before, so that I don't, by defining these new enter modules or stations, I don't need to go back and change the definitions or change the setup of the sequences that I already have defined. So make sure to save before we proceed. So, okay, we are good in terms of with respect to manufacturing cells. However, remember I said that these resources, these cards, are also going to transfer the parts from their arrival point to the manufacturing cell, and also from the manufacturing cells to the exit point. So if these cards or resources wants to move the parts from the arrival point to the manufacturing cells, I want you guys to think what is the entity, what is the module that I have to use here? Should I use an enter module or a leave module? So here I have to use a leave module, because remember, the leave module first is going to seize the resource and then does the routing. Here, to be able to transfer this entity to any one of these manufacturing cells, first I need a cart, I need a resource, and then I have to send the entity to these manufacturing cells. So here I'm going to use a leave module, and I'm going to name this leave the entrance. And let's assume this is again a transfer type of action that is going to happen. I'm not going to change anything else. First, I have to get a hold of the resources, seize the resources that are going to move the entity to these manufacturing cells, and the resource that I want is a cart. And then I'm going to route these entities to the right cell. How do I know which cell is the one that I have to send this entity to? I'm going to use the sequences that these entities carry, and the transfer time is in the variable that I have called as transfer time, and it's going to be 2 minutes. Make sure to connect the route module to the assign module, so that when the entities come to the system and we do all the assignments, then they go through the leave module to be sent to the right cell. And after they are done at the right cells, the last step of their sequences is that they are sent to the dispose station. However, when they get to the dispose station, I don't want just to have a station. Remember, they are coming to this dispose station with a resource, with the cards. So when I receive them at this station, I also have to release that resource and then send the entity out. So then, if I want to do that, if I want to receive them in this station and then release the resource, I need an enter module. So I'm going to delete this station module, and I'm going to bring an enter module. I have to also make sure for this module, I'm using the same name that I have used in the sequence definitions. So dispose station, that's the name I have used for the last station in the system. I have used dispose station. So just make sure to use the same name here. So I want this to be dispose station. And here I'm going to call it dispose manufacturing. Let's say. And I'm not going to change anything else. And here I say that when the entity has been transferred into this station, what I want to do is that I want to release a resource, and the resource that I'm going to release is the card. Don't change anything else. Later I will tell you what these cells are for. Press OK, and also make sure to connect these to the dispose module. So now let's go to the run setup. If you remember previously, we ran the model for 32 hours. That's what we are going to continue to do. So we are going to continue running the model for 32 hours and see what happens. So during these 32 hours, 144 entities left, or parts left the system. And if I click on the entities, you see that I see the value at the time, wait times, and also here I see some transfer times as well, just because I defined those transfer times specifically in the leave module. I specifically define them as transfer time. Now that they are listed as part of the transfer time. If I would have left them as part of the value at the time, you would see them here in the value at the time and nothing would appear in the transfer time. So this was an example of a simple scenario when we use resources to transfer entities to different locations or operations in the simulation, and the number of resources that we have available for performing the transfer can be a constraint in our model.